Tonight, an Israeli hit squad raids a hospital on the West Bank. Hideouts or havens, hospitals at the centre of this war. Israeli commandos armed with assault rifles entered a building disguised as doctors, one carrying a baby's car seat. In a targeted assassination, they shot 3 men described as terrorists. One of them was in his hospital bed. The video emerged as the UK government condemned Israeli ministers calling for the resettlement of Gaza. Tonight, we'll ask whether Britain's willingness to back a Palestinian state could move the dial in this conflict. Plus, while we focus on war in the Middle East, could another leader be planning his own military offensive? This evening, we'll see the human cost of closer cooperation between Beijing and Pyongyang. Plus, we ask, are we entering the age of the cyborg? That's as new Elon Musk technology saw a robot implanting a chip in a human brain. All coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Is a Palestinian state a real possibility? I ask that question because the British government today took its strongest stance yet on the two-state solution. Foreign Secretary David Cameron today emphasised the need to give Palestinians a political horizon which could include official recognition at the United Nations. Are these just words or true intent? Well, it's simply too early to say. But there is hope this could lead to ending the war in Gaza. Today, the British government also condemned Israeli ministers, including National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, who attended a conference calling for all people in Gaza to be resettled. The violence is continuing to spill over in the West Bank, where video has emerged of heavily armed undercover commandos raiding a hospital and killing 3 men described as militants. A lot to discuss tonight, so let's get started with our first report from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Burt.
The clock in the top right corner of the CCTV shows it's just before 5:45 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Undercover Israeli soldiers, men and women, have entered a hospital in Jenin in the occupied West Bank, disguised as doctors and patients. With weapons poised, they calmly walk through the hospital and towards their target. Inside this room, they executed 3 Palestinians. One appears to have been in a hospital bed. There is a bullet hole in the pillow. Blood is on the walls and floor. These are the 3 men who were killed. Israel says they were hiding in the hospital and planning an imminent October the 7th style terror attack. The IDF released this photo of a gun that they say one of the men had on him. However, according to his mother, one of the men, Basil Hazawi, was reportedly disabled and needed around-the-clock care in hospital.
They were sleeping. They sleep during the mornings. Thank God, this is the 4th month I've been in the hospital with the injured boy, and God chose them to be martyred. May God be pleased with them. May God be pleased with them.
The Israeli soldiers were reportedly in and out in just 10 minutes. The method of this operation, going into hospital disguised, has raised questions about Israel's tactics.
Supposing you go into a room, there are 3 people, and one of them's got some implement where if he presses a button, something horrible goes on. Well, yes, maybe you could justify an immediate killing of that person. If a policeman goes to arrest a person or 3 people, and there is no evidence of them fighting back, resisting, or using force against you, would he be justified in killing them? No.
The 3 men were buried in Jenin today. 58 Palestinians have now been killed in the West Bank this year, an average of almost 2 a day. Israel's war against Hamas isn't confined to just Gaza. Alistair Burt, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Well, let's bring in tonight's studio guests, journalist and author Latika Bourke and Alistair Burt, former Minister of State for the Middle East in the Foreign Office. Thank you both for joining us. I'm just going to pick up what Alistair said, Alistair, there, that, you know, another front potentially opening up. I mean, we have been seeing since just the beginning of this year, at least 60 people have been killed in the West Bank. We've got multiple fronts now, the war in Gaza, a sort of instability in Jerusalem, and now, of course, the West Bank.
The West Bank was always the front. And I think what was a surprise was the mounting tension there had been in the West Bank last year, because last year and the year before it were years of the highest number of casualties for a decade. And I think people expected the rise in tension there, the issues surrounding Al-Aqsa and the issues in East Jerusalem to be the spark of something that was going to cause the sort of conflict that we've seen in Gaza. So it is no surprise that that is still an area of immense difficulty, and this desperate polarisation between communities that will not be resolved unless there is a comprehensive resolution for West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza altogether. We're done with the days of separating one from the other and believing it can all be managed. Something has got to be a comprehensive resolution for all of it.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I just want to, first of all, just bring up the statement made by Lord Cameron today. He said, we should be starting to set out what a Palestinian state would look like, what it would comprise, how it would work. As that happens, we, with allies, will look at the issue of recognising a Palestinian state, including at the United Nations. I mean, these are pretty strong statements now that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think this is a very significant shift of the dial here. And I think a couple of things are going on. David Cameron would not be saying this. He is no fool. He's one of the most experienced communicators. He's a very safe pair of hands. It's why he was brought back to run the Foreign Office. So he is saying this for a reason, and I think for several reasons. One is they do need to absolutely crash through here. Secondly, I think this is a message to Benjamin Netanyahu. I think patience is running out from the United States and from the United Kingdom. We've seen some subtle messaging, I think, from Antony Blinken over the last few days, just expressing that similar disapproval with Netanyahu. And I think this maybe also gives an opportunity for, OK, well, who's going to run a Palestinian state? Is it going to be Hamas? We know that's not acceptable. So there's a way here now to open up a conversation about bringing back a PA.
And what the day after looks
exactly.
Like. A lot of conversation. I'm just going to pick up on what Latika just said there. You know, the fact that the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said multiple times, and most recently in a televised press conference, he said that, he told US officials in plain terms that he will not support a Palestinian state as part of any post-war plan. If there's anyone who understands what Lord Cameron's thinking is, it's you. But are they being tough enough? Are the allies, the UK and the United States, being tough enough on Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel?
It's a difficult relationship to manage. The United Kingdom and the United States have given Israel extraordinary backing following the events of October the 7th, and Israel is not in a position to gainsay that. It knows that it's had good allies. But your best friends know when things are going wrong. And it's been clear for some time that Israel was not going to achieve its objectives of having the hostages released and destroying Hamas militarily. It just wasn't possible. And I think now that's beginning to dawn. But wider things are starting to happen. I entirely agree that David Cameron has brought a different dimension to this. I have used the phrase in relation to the recognition of the State of Palestine almost since I became a Member of Parliament. That is, the United Kingdom will recognise the State of Palestine when it is most conducive to a peace process. Israel believed that meant never, and the Palestinians believed it meant never. Now, David Cameron has changed the wording, and he's right to do so, because the phrase didn't mean never. It just meant when it was going to be really useful, because it's such an important statement to make. Now there is a possibility, again, everyone knows that in order to conclude what's happening in Gaza, there has to be a horizon of something very different. Arab states agree with that, and that's why I think he's changed the rhetoric to start that process.
Well, I suppose the question is, you know, are they listening in Israel? Because at the weekend,
No.
So just pick up on that.
No, I think what we've seen, firstly, Prime Minister Netanyahu made the speech where he said he was resolutely opposed to two states. Well, I remember being minister, being in Israel and being told the official policy of Israel was two states. Clearly that was incorrect. We also saw this week a further demonstration by far-right ministers talking
at
about...
a conference on Sunday.
Talking about resettling Gaza. And these are the same ministers who talk about Judea and Samaria belonging exclusively to Israel. This is not going to happen. And I think now more people are realising this, that those views have to be dealt with because they are just as extreme as those who are professing something very different for the future of Israel.
And the Foreign Office, issued what I would say was a rare statement, saying the UK is alarmed by the conference in Jerusalem, calling for the resettlement of Gaza, and that Israeli ministers participated in this.
And every time the US or the UK ministers are facing the media, they're asked about these comments. That puts enormous domestic pressure on these governments. The Biden administration is already hemorrhaging support domestically over Israel. You could see the same dynamic here, and I think it's very interesting that David Cameron's position is actually a step further than Labor's stated position. So I think it's a very clever move politically as well for the UK to be out in front of this. But yeah, I do think this is a major, major problem for Israel. I was speaking to some friends there today. This has obviously gone down like a lead balloon there, but I'm not sure that the message is being received.
But do remember, we spend our time talking about the United Kingdom's position, US position and Israel. Nobody holds Hamas to account in the same way. Hamas isn't in a studio. Hamas isn't answerable for its actions and what it's doing, its holding of the hostages or anything like that. We must always remember that element in it as well. So Arab states have a responsibility to make very clear that what Hamas's ideology, if there is to be a state of Palestine, is ended. And they need to be very clear that that ideology, the expunging of the state of Israel and the Jewish population, is just not going to happen. And they have a part to play in this, as well as allies of Israel. Everybody's got to be involved in seeking.
But I think it's interrelated, right? Because if we start talking about what a Palestinian state looks like, there is no role for Hamas, according to the international community. So I don't think it's divorced from that.
Is that realistic?
In the early stages, I suspect not. I mean, looking at the administration of Gaza, Hamas leadership, present leadership, may well not be there. There are all sorts of things that are possible. I think those behind the attacks of October the 7th are never going to sit down with anyone representing serious governments. But Hamas is... remember when, after Iraq, the de-Baathification of Iraq, there were elements sort of running Gaza who will not be in the same category as the Hamas leadership. I don't know, but I think all the Arab states I've spoken to have said to consider excluding Hamas completely is very unlikely.
Yeah, well, we'll continue this conversation. Alistair, Latika, I'll keep you right here. But let's talk now about one of the world's most secretive nations, North Korea. Our knowledge about life inside the country is somewhat limited. Much of what we learn comes from defectors, people who make the dangerous decision to flee the country. Now, though, human rights groups are raising concerns about the number of defectors being taken back to North Korea, having fled to China. Sky News has spoken to the sister of one deportee who expressed fears for her sister's safety and accused China of treating North Koreans as, quote, animals. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports.
It must feel like ghosts and fragments are all that is left of this family. But such is the way when you're a defector from North Korea.
So this is your sister. And how old is she in this picture?
Kim Koo-lee escaped in the 1990s and eventually made it to London. At the time, she did not take her younger sister, Kim Cho-ok, with her, a decision that still haunts her.
From beginning, I have to take her. Even if I die together.
At just 14, Cho-ok did make it as far as China, but traffickers then sold her to a husband 3 times her age. For 25 years, she called China her home. She had a daughter, but no ID and no rights. A dangerous, undocumented life.
January time, she has a coronavirus. Very hard. Very hard. But she can't go to hospital. Nobody care. I think that time she understood. She tried to decide,
That she had to leave China.
Yeah. After she, getting better, sister, I have to come. I have to come. If I stay here, I will die like this.
So they made plans for her to travel to Vietnam, but just 2 hours in, and she was arrested by Chinese police. Within 6 months, the nightmare outcome for her family. She was deported back to North Korea.
There will be a lot of punishment, no food in the jail, hard work.
How unjust does that feel?
Really, I don't know. 25 years she lived. How could doing to this. Yeah, maybe they have a relationship with North Korea, but shouldn't do that. It's not human. We are not animal. If she go back to North Korea, like flies, they kill flies, easily kill them.
She was deported on October the 9th across this bridge on the eastern end of the border. On the same day, hundreds were sent back across these 5 border points. Numbers unmatched in at least a decade, up to 500 people in one day. At one of those border points in the city of Dandong, the Chinese can peer out at their secretive neighbour and celebrate their affinity too. But the border is largely still closed in the wake of the pandemic. We saw just a handful of trucks. Numbers aren't what they were, but locals say they are notable. Sometimes there are more, sometimes less, says this woman who works under the bridge. Some days there are no trucks at all. This is pretty much the closest you can get to North Korea from really anywhere in the world, but it remains such a secretive place. There is more traffic between these two countries now, but it is still extremely difficult to verify what happens to people once they're returned there. And that is the key issue. From outside the city, we caught a rare glimpse of the simple lives on the other side. Reports are of poverty, starvation, and brutal punishment for defectors. But China insists there is no evidence of this, and thus the return's not illegal. How does China justify these deportations, knowing that people very likely face imprisonment, torture, or even death?
There are no so-called North Korean defectors in China. People who illegally entered into China for economic reasons are not refugees. They violate Chinese laws.
But international pressure is heightening, including recent questions at a UN human rights review, secondary, say experts, to China's bigger geopolitical concerns.
The last thing that they want is to destabilize the North Korean state. The feared scenario from Beijing is that this kind of exodus or floodgate of North Korean escapees would result in the collapse of North Korea as it happened with East Germany back in 1989.
Back in London at North Korea's embassy, Kim Koo-lee says she will not stop fighting. But it's hard to know whether anyone's listening. Her sister has, in a sense, just vanished, a pawn in a much bigger picture. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News, in Dandong on the China-North Korea border.
Well, we've just got a bit of breaking news that's just come in the past few minutes. North Korean state media has reported that Pyongyang has carried out another strategic missile drill. That's the second in 2 days. In recent weeks, the leader Kim Jong-un has ramped up the testing of ballistic missiles. He also ripped up plans to reunify Korea, raising fears of a new conflict with the South. Beijing will be keeping a close eye on how tensions develop. But just some developing news in the last few minutes. Reported by North Korean state media that Pyongyang has carried out another strategic missile drill. Let's hear a little bit more from Helen Ann Smith.
Yes, the fact remains that the allegiance between North Korea and China is a very long-standing one, and it's a very important one here in the region. Certainly when it comes to the return of defectors, China would argue it's treaty-bound to do so. It's been doing so for many years. But although this allegiance is long-standing, be in no doubt, it is also a tricky one, certainly from China's perspective. China sees its neighbour as somewhat erratic, somewhat unpredictable, and there isn't always great pleasure here in Beijing when North Korea behaves in an unpredictable way, frankly. But nonetheless, China needs North Korea to turn to it in its time of need. And I think that desire and that need has become more serious recently as Kim Jong-un, North Korea's president, has moved closer to a certain Vladimir Putin of Russia. It's now almost certain that North Korea is selling arms to Putin to help him in his war in Ukraine. In exchange, it's very likely Russia is giving North Korea technical know-how to help it develop its weapons programs. And in that dynamic, China does not want to be left out. It wants to and needs to be a senior partner in that relationship. Unfortunately, for those North Korean defectors sent back, they are a small part to play in China maintaining that relationship. What we saw today is the third test in less than a week of a new type of cruise missile from North Korea. The South Korean military confirmed they were fired off North Korea's west coast. It's not new for North Korea to be testing new weapons, but what makes it feel more serious right now is tensions on the North Korean peninsula, on the Korean peninsula, I should say, are really at their highest point in many, many years. Just a couple of weeks ago, Kim Jong-un gave a pretty remarkable speech where he essentially indicated that North Korea would move away from a policy that has been the policy in North Korea for decades, aka Korean reunification. He made it clear that South Korea, instead of being a territory to be brought together, is really an enemy to be invaded, to be subjugated. It's a real shift in tonal language. Lots of people watching what Kim Jong-un will do next.
Helen Ann Smith with that analysis. Well, we'll be hearing more from my panel next. I want to talk about whether our focus on the Middle East has blinded us to those preparations being made in Pyongyang by Kim Jong-un. Do stay with us.
Well, over the years, because of what happened to Ian, we've always managed to get involved in any kind of charities that support young men. I think, as you probably know, that the rate of suicide amongst young men up to the age of 24, 26 is tragically high still. Us men are still very bad at dealing with things and talking about it. So we've used the opportunity that Ian gave us, sadly, to be able to help as much as we can. And to be honest with you, as a musician, just playing at a fundraiser for anything is probably the easiest thing I can do in the world. I'm still very proud of what we've achieved as Joy Division musically. And to me, it's important that even though Ian's not here to share it with us, that we can use his legacy to try and educate and help as many men and women as we can to talk and to get help. The gig is very intimate, actually. It's 200 people. It's like going back to the old days. The Star and Garter is a very important venue in Manchester for up-and-coming bands. So again, it's wonderful to help for that. The picture that Axie has put up on the wall was done by a wonderful guy called Philippe Carley, who's now a great Joy Division documentary. So we've managed to pull all these people in together. We're doing a Q&A. I've got Ian's best friend and the best man at his wedding helping me at the Q&A. I've also got Joy Division's first roadie, who's still my best friend of 45 years, Twinny, to answer some offbeat questions. I mean, people are used to me talking about Joy Division and also used to seeing my face and hearing my story. So I thought to get those two along will make it easier for me, and I'll be able to ask them some interesting questions as well.
Welcome back. Well, let's pick up that conversation about North Korea and whether the West should be taking more notice of Pyongyang right now. With me in the studio is journalist and author Latika Bourke and Alistair Burt, former Minister of State for the Middle East in the Foreign Office. Thank you both for staying with us here on the programme. Alistair, I'll come to you because there are North Korea watchers who say, look, we're all too used to this kind of bluster from Kim Jong-un and these missiles being tested, but that this time it's different.
I think one of the difficulties is you never quite know. This process of testing the missiles over a period of time, of them increasing in their sophistication and range, it has been going on for time. Diplomats work on the basis that there are thresholds, and so long as North Korea is still beneath the threshold of causing some dramatic intervention, then we know where we all are. But anything can go wrong. And the problem with testing the missiles and the repeated firing, the sophistication, somebody somewhere is working out, well, what can they be used for and when would they be used? So it is all escalation, even though we've seen it before.
And there can be miscalculations.
There can be miscalculations and something can go wrong, and then you have a tragedy, and then you have a real problem.
Latika, is this sort of provocation for attention?
I think it is something that cannot be divorced from the situation we find ourselves in over the last 2 years, which is Russia invading a neighbour, the US stretched, dealing now with 2 wars, potentially giving up on Ukraine, US heading into elections. And it's been said a lot, you hear this from NATO's Jens Stoltenberg, you hear it from Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels, that Russia is reliant on China and North Korea and Iran. How weak is Russia? But actually, I think what North Korea is showing is you look at it the other way and you see an emboldened North Korea. You see these alliances actually cementing and reinforcing each other, and then add Iran into that mix. And I don't think we have a safer world at all. It's also very interesting. Over the last few months, we have had a lot of leaders talk very openly about the prospect of war. And I don't think that they are doing that just for votes or just to fearmonger. I think they are trying to have a very serious conversation with the public that perhaps the next few years we see more conflict, not less.
We could also see in 9 months' time leadership change in the United States. And we saw Donald Trump have these summits and conversations with Kim Jong-un. There were many who were sceptical at the time and remain sceptical about whether that made any kind of difference. And it clearly, didn't.
No. The uncertainty that a future President Trump would cause would, I think, add to the instability and the concerns and the risk of miscalculation and the like. The thing that worries me most is his reported attitude on NATO. It was difficult enough when he was president, but we understand he was very sharp in relation to the Commissioner von Leiden saying, if Europe is attacked, we're not coming to help you anymore. NATO's finished. Now, that may have been said in private, it may not have been a public comment, but it's out there. And that reflects the attitude he had to NATO when he was president. This is a worry for all those who want to see a secure Europe and indeed a secure world.
And I guess very briefly, is Europe sort of waking up to that idea? Because for the longest time, they have felt that, if anything goes wrong, they're not home alone, the Americans are there.
It's not a question of waking up. There is an alliance which ensured that. And the United States, because it had seen Europe twice in the 20th century fall into a situation where the whole world was threatened, the United States took the view that it was more secure and safer if Europe was secure and safe. And that has kept Europe until we saw the invasion of Ukraine in a secure way. For that to be threatened is destabilising and is worrying because we don't know what the consequence would be.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Go ahead.
Because
I've got 30 seconds, but
previous presidents before Trump tried to make this case to Europe privately. They didn't listen. And now they're learning too late and the hard way that they should have actually invested in their own defences.
So the critique you're saying was fair enough?
I think Trump has done Europe a favour in putting them on notice. Obviously, nobody wants to see the disintegration of NATO. That would be a tragedy. But Europe had to step up.
It's one thing to ask for more resource to go into defence, and we have always been up to the level that NATO required, and others haven't. That's quite true. But it's one thing to ask for more money. It's quite another to say you're on your own, boys.
Do you think that will happen? It's a complicated process.
No.
Trump says a lot of things, and not a lot of them always came to fruition, did they?
I don't believe so. because I think the relationship between the United States and Europe is sufficiently strong. Nonetheless, the uncertainty and the worry, I mean, who knows what emboldens President Putin if he feels that NATO can't be secure? Does that embolden a seizure of more territory? How do the Baltic states feel about this?
And there is a belief inside NATO that there's no change to the situation in the war with Ukraine until we see the results of the US election, which I think Alistair underlines your point.
Indeed. Well, we'll continue the conversation. Next up on the programme, just over a week to go till the elections in Pakistan. And today, the former Prime Minister Imran Khan was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So is the country caught up in a cycle of revenge? We'll be discussing that next. Imran Khan went from cricketing icon to Prime Minister of Pakistan, to prison inmate. And today he was sentenced to 10 more years in jail, accused of leaking state secrets. Khan himself says the charge is politically motivated and the timing cannot be ignored, just days before general elections in which he's barred from standing. So are Khan's political ambitions over, and how did we get here?
Imran Khan, a polarising figure in Pakistan, a cricketer turned politician who ended up as the country's Prime Minister. only for it to crumble. He was arrested last summer. And the latest twist, sentenced to 10 years in prison. So who is Imran Khan and what's led to the sentence? He's been convicted of exposing official documents between the country's ambassador in Washington to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs by waving it at a rally. Khan claimed it was proof of a conspiracy by the Pakistani military and US government to topple his government. He's described the trial as a joke, as both the prosecution and defense teams were government-appointed lawyers.
They do not want to see me back in power. And in that way, they're dismantling the democracy of this country. In fact, they're playing with the future of this country.
But the allegations against Khan don't end there. More than 150 cases pending, ranging from contempt of court to inciting violence. Arrested twice, in May and August, he was jailed for 3 years in a corruption case. And there's since been a massive crackdown on his PTI party. Thousands of its members jailed, Khan's home becoming a battleground for protests. Many of Khan's supporters believe he's the victim of a deep state conspiracy. Popular opinion on him still split.
Look, the punishment that Imran Khan has received is wrong. Imran Khan is a politician, and whatever he did was for the betterment of the country.
I don't think that it is wrong, because Imran Khan used cipher for his politics, and cipher is a secret document. These kinds of documents must be kept secret.
He first became a global sports superstar. A friendship with Princess Diana, media attentions always followed him. Entering politics, Khan promised to build a new Pakistan. A path which took him all the way to Prime Minister 6 years ago, and now ends with prison.
Well, let's bring in Zulfi Bukhari, a former cabinet minister and advisor to Imran Khan. Thank you very much, Mr. Bukhari, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, given the accusations and cases against Mr. Khan, today's sentencing, although 10 years, doesn't come as a surprise.
No, it doesn't. The way that this trial was being conducted unlawfully and in the manner that it was being conducted in such a hurry and in such haste, it was obvious that, not even 10 years, we were expecting they would come out with something far more ridiculous, like a life sentence or even a death penalty.
So what are the options now on the table? Obviously, your team will appeal this?
Yes, I mean, don't forget that these are the lower courts. There's a high court, and then obviously there's the highest court in the land, which is the Supreme Court. We will be going to those, and we're very confident that this will be thrown out. We don't believe the case has any legs to stand on. Imran Khan was not even offered a defense. His lawyers were not even allowed to represent him in court. They were thrown out. So, basically the accused was not allowed a defense. There's no cross-questioning of any witnesses whatsoever. So it was basically a one-sided, predetermined decision by a manipulated lower court.
In many ways, this is Imran Khan versus the army of Pakistan. I mean, once Imran Khan took pride in his relationship with the army. Did he go too far, in your opinion, in attacking the army?
No, we still take pride in our army. The relationship, which probably you're referring to, that went sour, is of individuals. It's not of an institution as entirety. If there's a survey done in the Pakistan army tomorrow, Imran Khan will probably appear 80 to 85% most popular leader within the institution as a whole. But obviously, the decision makers at the top is only one or two, and obviously them and Imran Khan don't see eye to eye, and that's what the problem has been. It's a time of reconciliation. It's a time of both the most powerful person in the country and the most popular political person and
I guess,
party in the
Mr.
country.
Bukhari, what I'm trying to get at is that this has been part of a sort of vicious cycle that we've seen in Pakistan, where the ruling party struggles to coexist with the opposition. I mean, when Imran Khan was in power, we saw something very similar happen to Nawaz Sharif, where with the help of Imran Khan's PTI party, then the ruling party, Nawaz Sharif was accused of all sorts of things and pushed out.
Not at all, because Nawaz Sharif was accused of corruption allegations well before Imran Khan. When the Panama Leaks
and that is what Imran Khan is also being accused of. You know, I know this is about a document, but he's also been accused of corruption and various other charges.
The Panama Leaks was a worldwide phenomenon. Someone who's born and bred in Britain knows of it very well. It was something that he was unanimously acclaimed by, and he couldn't ascertain his assets in the Panama Leaks. And going forward, it wasn't something when Imran Khan was even in power. He wasn't the prime minister or whatsoever. His decision was given well before. And the fact of the matter is that Imran Khan's case right now, which he's just been convicted of today, is of leaking a secret document. Let's be very clear here. The secret document that they are referring to was declassified by the federal cabinet of Imran Khan's government.
I mean, Mr. Bukhari, I've got about a minute left. And I guess the point I'm trying to get at is, and I understand the accusations against Nawaz Sharif, but the point is that this is sort of a vicious cycle that we see in Pakistani politics.
Well, over 70, 75 years, you're right, we do see this cycle of politicians coming in, getting a sentence of 10 years, and then coming back after 2 years and becoming prime minister again. This has happened very often. However, like I said today, is that he's been convicted of a felony, which isn't a classified document. It's a declassified document. How he can be convicted of a classified document, which has been declassified by the cabinet, the federal cabinet of a government of the country, is beyond anyone's imagination.
Okay, Mr. Bukhari, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our panellists, Latika and Alistair. Alistair, you know Pakistan all too well. You spent time there. You understand Pakistani politics. I mean, just picking up on that last point, we have seen this time and time again in Pakistan.
It's a political landscape of much conflict, and I think the sadness is unresolved conflicts and too easy to bring people out onto the streets. The challenges are multiple. There are a couple of provinces that are waiting for elections that have not yet taken place. It's too easy to, as I say, to bring people out onto the streets. And always in the background is this concern that at some stage the military step in and the military say to the politicians, enough, and then you get a military government, and then you have to reconstitute your politics and everything else. Ultimately, it's a matter for the Pakistani people to resolve. But you hope all the time that the history is broken by individuals who put institutions first and manage to overcome the challenges that are there and build the sort of structures that can withstand ordinary political pressures without getting into crises that lead Pakistan's neighbours to be concerned and put those states and provinces where there are already difficulties under more pressure. And never forget the pain that Pakistan has suffered through terror. Many, many lives have been lost through terror in Pakistan. It's a constant fear and danger. And again, its government is looked for to try and resolve that issue and keep people safe.
Latika, as Mr. Bukhari said, their advisor to Imran Khan, I mean, there is an election playing out here as well in about 10 days' time, and it's being described as sort of the most distorted election in the 76, 77-year history of Pakistan.
I think to put it in cricketing terms, Yalda, it looks like match fixing, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty clear what's going on. What I think is really fascinating here is that Imran Khan is jailed but not silent. And you see this not only through his supporters talking to you tonight, but also Yalda, he's got a very active social media presence. He's called for his supporters to go out. We'll have to see if they indeed do and whether that leads to any sort of change or anything at all. But he wrote an essay for The Economist today in which he actually directly said that his coup was the result of him not wanting to host US military bases in Pakistan. Now, this is something that the US government denies, the State Department denies, but it is very interesting that we have not seen any statements from the US government, from the British government, as far as I'm aware, condemning what is clearly a sham trial.
I mean, Alistair, just to sort of pick up on that, and just to pick up your point, actually, about who controls things in Pakistan. You know, is it the intelligence service, the ISI, the military, or, you know, the civilian government at the end of the day? We see this kind of revolving door of people, names like Nawaz Sharif, and we mentioned him there. We're now hearing that he's likely to win this next election.
Politics has always got to have plenty of space for comebacks, and in Pakistan, politics is not unique in relation to that. But the point made about alliances and conspiracies and who controls things is very real. It's not the only region where conspiracy theories abound. And it's very easy to get one out there, particularly if it involves the United States. There are people who want to believe anything about the United States. The intelligence services are also a key part of it. And for many years, diplomats were concerned about the relationship with Afghanistan and the Taliban in Afghanistan and who was working in whose interest there. So the intelligence services are a key part of the authority structure in Pakistan. But ultimately, if democracy is to prevail in a country where millions of people go to the polls, want political parties, want an opportunity, as Imran Khan stated when he became Prime Minister and began to lead his party in politics, an end to the corruption, then the institutions have got to be built that will give that some support. And maybe this election might be a turning point, but it doesn't look as though it's starting in a particularly comfortable way.
No. Alistair, Latika, thank you. We'll continue the conversation coming up. Some are saying we're entering the age of the cyborg. We'll be asking what Elon Musk hopes to achieve by putting chips into our brains. And should we be worried?
The pound has rallied. Moderation. Interest rates peaking.
Up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. Legal abortion! It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Now, it reads like a script from a sci-fi movie. Neuralink, a tech company owned by Elon Musk, has just inserted a brain chip into its first human patient. But what do they hope to achieve? Well, our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, is here with me. And Tom, I mean, before we get to how worried we should be about this chip in our brain, this isn't new technology, but it's Elon Musk.
That's right. You know, he has a proven track record of ambition, determination, a whole lot of cash, and he's bringing it to this real holy grail in neuroscience. Can we connect people's brains to computers? The people who benefit the most right now, immediately, would be those who've lost the ability to communicate, either through a spinal injury or motor neuron disease, something like that. If you can connect them up to a device, they can use that to communicate, send messages, make calls, whatever. You can imagine the possibilities are endless. Elon Musk, yeah, he's throwing a lot into it. He's being very ambitious. They're going to parts of the brain that other companies are not trying, going deeper with more electrodes, thousands of them into particular parts of the brain. But yes, this is not a first. Other people are doing slightly more cunning, clever things, arguably quicker than his lot are doing. And, you know, he is going to face challenges that I think he's not familiar with in his engineering, rocket building business. These are real people. These involve animal experiments, regulations, things that has slowed Neuralink down and kind of challenged Musk and possibly the way he works. And what's more, you don't necessarily have to put an implant into someone's brain to do this stuff. One of the challenges here, you know, Musk's technology might only benefit a limited number of people. But as we've been finding out today, there are other ways possibly more, that could be expanded to less wealthy communities, things, of reading people's brains.
Imagine the joy of connecting with your loved ones, browsing the web, or even playing games using only your thoughts.
For 8 years since founding Neuralink, Elon Musk has been wanting to get inside our heads.
We think probably in about 6 months we should be able to have our first Neuralink in a human.
It took 6 months longer than that. But now Neuralink says a human volunteer has been fitted with their implant. It's designed to measure brain activity from more than 3,000 microscopic wires routed into the brain using a custom-built robot, currently aimed at helping people with spinal injuries or motor neuron disease communicate via a computer. It's not a world first. Competitors of Neuralink have already successfully demonstrated implanted brain-computer interfaces, and there are other ways to read people's minds. In this lab at Imperial College, I'm being fitted with a headset that measures my brainwaves without scalpels, even needles. So this headset is covered with an array of electrodes that are measuring the electrical activity of my brain indirectly through my skin and my skull. And it's been trained on hundreds of volunteers that are fed into an AI model over here to interpret the brain signals that correlate to motor function, the ability to move. In this case, moving my hands. So that means even a volunteer like me who's never come across this interface before can use it to play a computer game, not by actually moving my hands, just by thinking about moving my hands. The focus of this spin-out company is to help patients regain function following a stroke. And advances in AI may mean wider applications without risky surgery.
This is a very exciting field because the non-invasive technology allows for many electrodes to be on the surface of the scalp, and we get information from all of them. And using machine learning, we're able to extract that information in a different way.
Elon Musk brings determination, endless wealth, and hype to brain science. But animal and human trials bring ethical and technical hurdles that make self-driving cars and rocket science look easy.
We've got Tom still here, and we've got Latika and Alistair back with us, our panellists. Tom, just really quickly, I mean, should we be worried? I know it's still early stages.
It's the stuff of science fiction, isn't it? You know, the ability to effectively read people's thoughts. Also, who owns this data? You know, what are those sort of ethical questions? We've got familiar with enough of those with big tech and, you know, our social media profiles. So this is just colossal. But we are not there yet. You know, these devices are still very much an experimental territory. But you talk to people in the field and they're saying, we need to start having those conversations now, because what we don't want to have is everyone reacting to new technology emerging, like we saw with AI at the beginning of last year, and then frantically trying to catch up with the regulations. So now's the time to start having that conversation.
Oh, my God, Alistair, chip in your brain.
Absolutely. And we were having a conversation about which politicians do we think have already had a chip in their brain and which politicians we'd like to see. You can certainly see therapeutic possibilities. And I think once the technology is there, it becomes, you don't stop it, but how indeed do we take any reasonable control of this? How are we able to manage? Has morality kept up with the science? And I think that's where the exploration is going to be. But stopping the science, I think, is very unlikely. And you can think of all sorts of mechanical things that could be improved or changed by alteration in the brain.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed that out earlier, but Latika, thoughts?
I'm with Elon. I can see a world where people rush to implant wearables. I mean, women do it for the contraceptives already. I don't think it is that crazy to see a future where people see a health benefit or a mobility benefit and want something implanted to help them do that.
I mean, but just, I've got 30 seconds. The data, are you worried about that?
I think humans have long given up on caring about their data, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Let's just handle
we all
it
use our phones.
OK, well...
That's just what the big tech bosses want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying I agree, I'm just saying it's a reality.
If I had a chip that enabled me to play by sight any piece of piano music I saw, I think that is a chip I would welcome.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I'm going to end it on that thought. Alistair, Latika, Tom, thank you so much for joining us on this evening's panel. Well, as we said, it could go either way. It could mean huge leaps in medicine, but also so many ethical concerns, as we said. That's all for tonight's programme. Thank you again to our panellists and for Tom for his report. Next up, the news at 10. Good night.